Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Welcome back to State of Current Affairs with your hosts Lillian S. Cauldwell and Viki Chang. Yes, from Singapore, that island. Yes, let's not forget, lest we forget. And on Passionate World Talk Radio Network, a wholly owned subsidiary of Global Media Network LLC, which stands for Limited Liability Company, just in case you wondered. Educate, enlighten, entertain. And today's episode, Vicki and I will be talking about climate change. It is changing, and if you keep up to date, they're waiting for the doomsday glacier to finally melt and swallow up all those islands, not to mention United States. Sort an island, sort of, if you had Canada.
Swallow up the islands, and we
The
are one
islands,
island
yeah,
here.
the islands. And we're going to be talking about a few other things related to climate change. So, and there's a new technology that's so new that hardly anybody knows about it. That's how new it is. I mean, it's squeaky new. So, without further ado, I'm going to present to you. Yes, I'm a poet, even though I'm such a long fellow. Yes. Vicky, ta-da!
Hi, Lillian. Thank you once again for hosting the show, State of Current Affairs. State of Current Affairs, it is such an important show for us, Lillian, because you and I from different parts of the globe get to talk about our current affairs. And this is the affairs that touches and affects the main street people and topics that the mainstream media do not talk about, and our roles become so important, Lillian. And I can't even express and start to even talk about how important podcasters and digital radios like yourself and myself is important to the Main Street people wherever they are, and that's why we exist from the United States and to Singapore. And not only we're going to talk about United States and Singapore, we really are talking about global issues here. We are just channels as in tunnels of information that brings to the Main Street people the issues most contentious, most closest to their hearts. So without further ado, Vicky, Esther Chang from Singapore, is 9:43 p.m. here at the equator. How wonderful we are to be able to connect today, 7th of October, from the United States and all the way to Singapore. We're going to talk about the first topic here, which I am bringing up the effects of climate change. And I'm going to talk about here you can find, if anyone's going to follow, you can find this article on www.un.org/en climate change on the website of United Nations. And I'm going to talk about climate change because I have been involved since 2004. I was the climate change organization a chairwoman and the president for a couple of years as an NGO in Singapore. I read a lot and researched a lot on climate change, and that was when your president, Lillian, your vice president, um, what's his name? He who wrote The Inconvenient Truth, the first book that came out, The Inconvenient Truth. And I was one of the people who got that because it was sent to me as an NGO in Singapore. Um, I want to talk about climate change because there is so still many falsehoods and many people who actually perpetuate that climate change is not real, that it is a huge conspiracy. But I'm going to say
Excuse
time
me.
and again, the scientists have proven that they are real data from scientists that goes to you to tell you that, hey, climate change is real. Whatever name you call it, it could be called global warming, it could be called extreme climate, extreme temperatures, extreme weather, or just change in climate or change in your environment. Whatever name you put it, let's not split hairs on it. Things are changing and things are affecting us. So we don't want to make it political. In your country, it may be called global warming. In my country, it may be called climate change. In another country, it may be called extreme temperatures. So, whatever name you call it, we are being affected. So, according to the website here, climate change, there are lots of effects and causes of climate change. We're not going to go into the causes of climate change because there are data from the last 20 years, last 30 years about CO2, how it's affecting us, but it's much more than that. Let's not talk about that. Let's talk about the effects of climate change that is affecting us. Climate change, number one, hotter temperature. As greenhouse gas concentration rise, the last decade, 2011 to 2020, is the warmest on record on Earth. Number two, more severe storms. Destructive storms have become more intense and more frequent in many regions. And as temperature rise, more moisture evaporates, it exacerbates extreme rainfall, flooding, causing more destructive storms. The frequency and extent of storms is affected by warming oceans. And I'm not even going to start talking about cyclones and hurricanes because America is experiencing right now increased drought. Extreme temperature is changing water availability, making it scarcer in more regions. Global warming exacerbates water shortages in already water stressed regions like in Singapore. Next, a warming, rising sea. The ocean soaks up most of the heat from global warming. The rate at which the ocean is warming strongly increased over the past 2 decades across all the depths of the ocean. And of course, it leads to loss of species, animals. It affects agriculture and a change in agriculture and health risk. And also, we want to talk about climate change displacement of population. Now, these are real stuff. We can talk about, let's start very quickly and just superficially because we've only got 25 minutes and now just about 20 minutes. We're not just talking about the polar bears. You know, when we first started talking about climate change like 10 years ago, we talked about, okay, the polar bears are drowning. And if you look at YouTube, the polar bears are drowning because the ice are melting and they couldn't find food and they dive deep into the ocean to look for fish. And then when they come up, hey, the iceberg has already melted and they have no place to go and they drown. Listen, polar bears drown. And at that time, like 10 years or 15 years ago, when you think about polar bear, and in Singapore, we don't care about polar bear here because this is a tropical island. Climate change or climate effects have got nothing to do with me. I don't really care about polar bears. However, 10 years down the line, we're talking about 2024, we are witnessing real effects of climate change right here in Singapore because researchers have already called out they have really called out the warning signs about 20 years ago about rising sea levels and rising sea levels that will actually rise 1 meter to 1.5 into certain places over 2 meters in the next 10 to 20 years time. And that was rewinding 20 years ago. 20 years later, we are experiencing climate migration, population migration, and we're talking about climate refugees, that's the term. And we're talking about rising sea levels. And of course, with rising sea levels, who are the people most affected? Islands, island like Singapore. And when people are saying, okay, Greta Thunberg is making a storm out of a teacup, or she's like creating a lot of. I don't know if American audience and listeners know who Greta Thunberg is. She is a Swedish girl, European girl, who actually calls out about climate change. She's about 15 years old now. She's about 18, I think. Um, we are looking at in case study, whatever the scientists have reported 20 years ago, we are already experiencing in Singapore because we are getting floods whenever it rains. Because water, imagine, when it rains in the cycle of ecosystem, when the sea dries up, Water molecules goes up into the clouds. It comes down as water particles through the clouds. As rain, it goes down into the ground and onto the land, and then it goes up again when it evaporates. It is a cycle. So whenever it catches more moisture in the air right now because of rising temperatures, it catches more vapor in the air, and rainfall begins to be more, and the rain begins to be heavier, and the rain begins to have longer duration and in more magnitude, bigger spaces. And one of the countries that I feel that I can rightly say, because we are experiencing that already whenever it rains, it floods. Not only that, the rising sea level, according to Channel News Asia, if you look at my next article, it says that Singapore by 20 by 2100 by 2100, the sea level will rise 1.5 meters. And what does that mean? 1.5 meters. When the water comes down into the land, it's supposed to displace out into the ocean, and now it cannot displace out into the ocean. It gets accumulated into the land. And when it gets accumulated into the land, it cannot be displaced out. What happens? The land surface area shrinks, and that means there's rising sea level and you get less surface area, and people living along the coastal areas need to be migrated inland. So they are called the climate refugees, if I make it so plain for the listeners and the viewers. It is information, but it is also educational. Now think about islands and islet. Where do we run to when water cannot be displaced out into the ocean? When it rains, it goes into the land, it cannot be displaced out, and there's less land for us. Where do we run? We have to go upwards. It means that we have to build upwards. But when it goes upwards and there's no more upwards you can build, where do you go? You've got to migrate out. And therefore, there's a lot of countries in Asia, Thailand, Bangkok, the city of Bangkok is sinking because the rising sea level is coming into the main city. Jakarta is sinking. The water is coming up, and it is migrating the capital, and that's the political capital and the economic capital, to another place which is like how many kilometers away. They have already declared that the capital is no more. It is migrating to another place, and likewise many countries. And why Asia? Because this is a tropical island, this is a tropical equator, this is a place where you can feel the temperature rise and the water rise. And what happens when the iceberg rises? If you look at the globe, when the iceberg dissolve or melts, the water rises into the sea, into the sky. The water goes up into the sky. It transports itself in, as the cloud to another part of the globe, and it drops down as rain, right? It has to go somewhere because no molecule is destroyed. You understand it, ladies and gentlemen? It goes up as hurricanes or cyclones or as flood or as rising sea level when the iceberg in Greenland melts. Why we did not care about polar bear 20 years ago, but we got to care about our lives right now. So I'm just going to say that everything has an effect. When in the past it was theoretical and a story, now 20 years later, we are facing, I would call, climate refugees and climate effects, and there's something called climate mitigation actions. And we cannot talk about climate mitigation action because there's a whole lot of things that we're going to talk about. How do we replace people when and where they are displaced from the coastal areas and places whereby it is lower than sea level? So over to you, Lillian. Now, this is a big issue. I'm trying to give you the whole spectrum in like 10-20 minutes, the whole understanding, the whole story of climate change. It is science, and we are really feeling here in the tropics because that's where the rainfall falls most, and that's where the water kind of evaporates most. It has to come down. And capitals are in countries, capitals are already declared that they have to move, and the people are already moving. And think about Nepal, right? Nepal, you've got Himalayas, the mountains, they're melting, and you've got people at the foot of the mountain facing rising sea levels and flooding, and they have to be displaced. Now, these are the news that are so small because they come from third world countries and they don't make an impact or inroad into the mainstream media, and that's why we have to raise these issues up, particularly in third world countries where their news are not able to come out into the mainstream media. So it's our responsibility to let everyone know that there are situations in third world countries. They are the most affected by climate change. I would call it extreme temperatures. If when the cold gets colder, and the warm gets hotter, and the rain becomes heavier, the hurricanes become stronger, and the sea level rises higher. So over to you, Lillian. That's my report for the people and for the listeners and the viewers.
Thank you. Now, should you wonder about some of the statements, let me tell you something. In outer space, in the space station, I should say stations because more and more countries are sending up astronauts and building stations, they can see Antarctica turning green.
Yes, yes.
Lots of green, which is what Antarctica was before it turned white. But now
Yeah,
it is turning green. And they can see
yeah,
this from space.
yeah.
So that should give you an indication. Number two, here in the United States, our storms, hurricanes, Florida just experienced one, Helen, and it literally wiped out total towns. Nothing's
Yes.
left. And we're not talking about the coast, we're talking about the
The inland,
interior,
inland.
inland. So you're wondering about where that rainwater is going, folks? Do
Has to
you
come
know
down.
that one of the national
Anything
parks
that
has
goes up has to come down.
went down, has shut down because the road leading into it was destroyed by the excessive rain from the hurricane. And even this week, they are suffering from additional hurricanes who are coming through. Kirk
Another
apparently
hurricane is
is
coming
already
through the
a category
US.
4, and
Yes.
there's several others that are now showing up as well that are making things quite bad for the residents there.
Yeah.
And it's something to consider. In fact, global warming in the United States, they have insurance for when your home goes underwater. One of the major insurance companies for water damage has canceled over, I would say, a billion people with their
Wow.
claims from Helen,
Wow.
and they don't have
Wow.
the finances
They're
to
going
pay them
bankrupt.
all off, plus subsequent storms coming in.
Yeah.
Another effect, something for you to ponder,
Yeah.
a couple built a hurricane proof house. And then they showed you what the house looked like before the hurricane. And then they showed you the vacant lot after the hurricane.
You got floated out.
Yes. If you join me this week, I should say, when you join me this week, I will be doing a podcast about the mental and emotional effects of global warming, because this is something that not only affects animals. Oh, guess what? We're animals too. Yeah, we descended from the great apes. So, as a result, we have been affected by what's going on, and we don't handle it very well at all. And it doesn't matter whether you're living on the coast or in the interior, you're going to be affected. And something else one should consider, they are now saying that Americans are leaving primary cities in droves. Think New York City, which is surrounded on water. Think Boston. Hell, think about Washington, D.C. There's a major river that runs right into town. Think San Antonio. They have canals up there where they travel by boat. Remember Venice? That's in Europe.
Yeah,
They've been having trouble with water for centuries. So
it's
you
sinking.
can ignore it if you want. You can put your head into the sand. Of course, you may find some water down there, but you may do that. But you cannot ignore the fact that our planet is changing due to our irresponsibility and non accountability for our behavior and actions. Now, Viki explained very carefully and in approachable English about water. And if every square inch of your land is filled with concrete or asphalt, the reason why trees have roots and plants have roots is to absorb the
Yes.
moisture coming in. In fact, in the good old days, 25, 30 years ago, in the 20th century, people planted shrubs, bushes, trees, flowers with deep roots to keep the soil from washing away. If and when you ever watch the movie about the 13 lives being saved of the Thai boys who were caught in the cave, and one of the scenes is where they tell the professional geologists are telling the villagers, well, the reason why you're having flood problems is because your dirt can no longer absorb the water that's falling from the sky. And that's why we have to sandbag everything to make sure that it doesn't get any more permeated with water. That's why. Why do the homes built on the tops of the mountains in California cascade down their mountains? Because there's no way for the soil to be retained. It's called erosion. Why do they stack old Christmas trees on the beaches? Because the sand dunes no longer retain their retention of seawater. They are washed away. We have rendered them useless, weak. And we've done that because of our own greed for what we considered a great view. Well, 20,000 feet under the sea is a great view, too. However, we haven't developed the capacity yet for our lungs to adjust for living underwater.
Yeah,
It
and
may come down to that, but we don't
yeah,
have it, folks. And
and
before you shrug your shoulders and say that's not going to happen, there was a report recently saying that there will be no freeze warnings declared this year. None. No wind chill factors. None. So the people in the tropics can tell you that when they don't receive any wind freeze warnings or freeze chill warnings, the insects that annoy, bite, sting them, they don't die. And that will happen in the United States.
yeah, Lillian, I just want to give a couple of very real examples
Please do.
um, that is not theoretical for your listeners, for our listeners and our audience. Number one, when I was in Switzerland, I've traveled a lot. I traveled very widely when I was in Switzerland. You can go trekking or hiking in the Swiss mountains, and you've got lots of wonderful Swiss mountains, the Swiss Alps, and the French Alps. And the ice that I went there 20 years ago is almost gone. So you've got all these wonderful mountains in Switzerland. You can see the ice, the white color that's actually melted away, and the greens are coming out. So, and the greens and the browns. Browns are the rocks beneath the ice, and of course the greens. It's because it started to grow grass for like since the earth has started. You've never seen the Alps in green, but the Alps are now in green and in brown. And when I talk to the locals, they say, yes, it's such a huge thing in Switzerland because they are living there. And about just during the pandemic times, just before the pandemic, there was a big, huge flood in Switzerland because the ice was melting and they have never had flood in the whole history of Switzerland. And of course, because the houses are all, down the slopes, the way they actually built their houses, but they did experience the first massive flood. That's one real life experience because I saw it with my own eyes. Number two, in France, again, my own encounter. And I want to share this with your listeners and your viewers because these are not just data that you read from internet. This is people's lives, and we have a real encounter with people whose lives are directly affected, like mine in Singapore, and also people in Europe, in Switzerland, and also in France. For example, because you talked about insects, right? Now let's talk about agriculture. Um, and they were saying that the wineries, the vineyards, right? Some of these agriculture are facing, um, I should say, erratic temperatures already. That there are certain crops that used to be able to be harvested at a particular time of the year because you have to predict. They are livelihood of the farmers, right?
Mm-hmm.
They find that they cannot grow them anymore. Number two, they find that certain weeds are coming out and certain insects are coming out that did not exist historically in the agricultural land. So, and they couldn't harvest certain things already. And the times have become erratic, the rainfall have become erratic, the crops have become unpredictable and affects the livelihood of the farmers. And therefore, this exacerbate grocery prices. And of course, people like us who are consumers, we need to buy the crops. We call it groceries or we call it food or vegetables in the shop, a supermarket. But for the farmers, that's their crops. So these are real things we're talking about. Farmers aren't able to grow uh, uh, the crops anymore, or they're finding weeds are coming out that they never had. They're finding insects that are invading the places that they never had, and the temperatures are erratic. Either they got drought or they got more rainfall where there shouldn't be, and it's affecting. We're talking about the whole agricultural cycle. So that's real, Lillian. That's real.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. And people do not think in those terms here in the United States. One of the things they're now saying is that our agricultural system is under attack because a lot of the regions that formerly had a lot of water, especially underground, no longer exists. And so they have to reinvent and try to figure out how they're going to continue their agricultural plowing, harrowing the fields without things drying out and creating another dust bowl. Because here in the States, we're experiencing shortages. And it doesn't have to do with the dock workers, it's just because our agricultural system has been affected by the weather, and the weather is no longer predictable. And places where it should be raining hasn't seen rain in 20 or 30 years, and places where there's too much rain
yeah,
is continual floods. Now, when
Yeah.
I lived up in Texas, for example, outside of the city, they would reserve large, empty, useless land and dig them out to form bowls. And when it rained too much, the bowls that they dug out would contain the excess water, which was wonderful, except those bowls got bigger and larger every year because there was more rain than land that could soak up all that excess water. And as every school child knows, if it doesn't go down, there's only one place for it to do. Actually, two. It either spreads out like this or it goes up. And if you want to believe in the biblical story of Noah's Ark, and the deluge, of rainwater that God poured upon the earth, we all know what happened. And yet nobody seems too concerned about it. And I believe that maybe whether you totally 100% agree or not, it will affect your food of producing what they call supply and demand. They're already advertising and telling people online what kind of food they need to buy to start storing away. And if you're wealthy, that's fine. But if you're living from paycheck to paycheck, it's going to be a little difficult for you to put away food when you can barely feed your family with what you're making now. So that is not an answer or solution to our current problem.
Yeah. Lillian, we can continue the topic because climate change is
Tomorrow.
a huge topic.
Absolutely.
Because I'd like to close quickly for the benefit of the listeners and the viewers. Very quickly, Meta, which is the parent of Facebook, which is, of course, the owner. We all know Mark Zuckerberg, the number two richest man in the world, and talking about in this world, and really talking about on the globe. Um, he has a new, if you look at the YouTube that he's just launched a couple of days ago, I think last week, he has launched himself, Mark Zuckerberg, a new kind of spectacles, glasses, that is the Meta Smart glasses, that can actually, it's actually driven by AI technology. That when one of the functions of this AI glasses is that when you see someone in this on the street, maybe in a subway, you kind of strain on the person, and we kind of like zig zig on the person's face. Immediately, it searches for the person's public information, whatever information in the whole of the internet, and gives it to you in your eye. Only you can see that the name, the workplace, school, background, family, address, contact information, social, everything regarding that particular person from that face and the name, of course. So that was something that was launched a few days ago that the viewers and the listeners could look at on YouTube. It's called the Matter Smart Glasses, but it's been picked up, of course, the college students. And look at this article. The article is by The Verge, TheVerge.com. College students used Meta's smart glasses to dox people in real time. And what did these two students do? Two Harvard students have created an eerie demo of how smart glasses can use facial recognition technology to instantly dox people's identities, phone numbers, and addresses. And the most unsettling part of the demo is that it uses current and most widely used technology um, to search for public databases. Now, think about this. And I've seen this on YouTube, whereby college students are using and having fun with it to dox people in the subway. They wear the glasses and they can see the person through the glass, but you don't know, because when you look at me, you're just looking me normal person, but I can see who you are just from your face, because it uses facial recognition. It searches instantly. It gets your name, your address, your telephone number, and then it can have a conversation with you. Hey, I think I know you. You were involved in the XXX organization, aren't you? And your mom, da 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 da, your brother, da da da. Now think about that. Of course, the college students have got a blast over this. Now think about that if it lands in the hands of bad actors, Lillian. We're talking about
It's called
scammers.
invasion of privacy.
We're talking about scammers. Yes, we're talking about, for example, invasion of privacy, but we're talking about scammers. We're talking
Yes.
about
And you cannot stuff
any kind of
Pandora back in
terrorists. We're
box.
not even talking about religious terrorists. We're talking about data terrorists. We're about
Yeah.
people who are terrorizing your lives. And we're talking about people who can scam your money, scam your lives. You're talking about pedophilia, etc., etc. People who can just grab your kid from the school, because they can tell instantly the teacher that you are the uncle, the auntie of who and who, and they stay in who. And when they try to verify your information, you gives all the right information of the child. Now think about what this is going to happen and wreak havoc on Earth. And I'm not going to say that it's going to happen instantly, but we can use this to extrapolate technology, whatever it is. It could be smart glasses, it could be whatever kind of application. It's going to wreak havoc on people's lives the way we cannot see. I'm look at social media, the hate information and the hate trolls, and how many people have committed suicide, for example, even just through comments on social media, and people who just live stream people having bad, kind of private moments on the at home, when live cameras are placed in their homes. I'm not even going to talk about that. We're talking about a lot of information, a lot of technology that's going to land in the hands of bad actors, and anyone can get hold of them. So Lillian, that's my wrapping article for our listeners and our audience. Over to you, Lillian.
We want to thank everybody for listening to State of Current Affairs with Viki Chang and Lillian Cauldwell. And as you can see below, if you have something to say, text us at 484-364-1032, and your comment and your name, if you want that supplied, will appear on the show. We're also looking for guests to come on in to express their opinions and to hear their perspectives from any place in the world or even from the space station, because you may see things in space that we don't see down here on the planet every day. And I'd be quite interested to hear what you have to say, actually. State of Current Affairs is brought to you by two companies, MyFlex. It's a no-brainer. It's innovative, and it gets you where to me immediately. So try it out. https:// myflex, myflex.ai/ESC73. Sign up for a monthly subscription. Low is $30, 50, and then $100 on monthly subscription, and invest in your future, because if they've already made glasses that can strip you of your humanity
Identity,
and personal
yes,
information
privacy, and
within
your
2.5
family.
seconds, just think what they're going to do by next week. Come on, think about it. Something. So join the revolution. Also, you can earn money while you learn. How good is that? And besides, Christmas is coming. The goose is getting fat. Please put money in Ruby.ai's hat. And also brought to you the obstacle of podcast training. Go over to our website, https:// dot passionateworldtalkradio.com/masterclass. 2 months, every single day, 45 minutes, interactive, whether you're middle school, high school, college, junior college, continuing education, charter school, private school, really doesn't matter. Beginner, intermediate, expert, The road of life requires that you continue your education. Come continue it with me. The obstacles of podcast training. So, if you want to see this all over again, very easily go over to https:// passionateworldtalkradio.com. Scroll down, and on the bottom, you'll see State of Current Affairs. Click on it. Yes, it'll take you to a page, and you're going to see a Google link. Click on that, and guess what? It takes you right into the bowels of Passionate World Talk Radio's video section. And Viki, so distinguished, you won't have any trouble finding our videos on State of Current Affairs with the loudmouth, Lillian. Yes, great entertainment for the whole family. An opportunity to air what, well, quote unquote, pisses you off. Because global affairs affects everybody.
Yes.
Get your voice heard. And then you're going to say, but Lillian, nobody listens. Really? I had a lawyer's advocate on the program in the 20th century, and she got 5 laws passed in Illinois to help the veterans. 5 laws. So don't tell me we don't make an impact, because we do. If you believe in yourself, everybody else will believe in you too. You can find us on youtube.com/ @Passionate World Radio, facebook.com / Passionate World Radio. You can also, like I said, find us on the website. Go look at the blog, https:// passionateworldtalkradio.com / blog, and listen to the audio if you're not into seeing strange faces. So you really do have your pick. We're on 25 different social media sites. So come and join us, or text us, leave your comments, ask your questions, or ask to appear as a guest on our show, and we will send you the link. So thank you very much for listening. And remember, join us tomorrow, 9:30 p.m. Singapore time, 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, until the clocks change and then everything goes back an hour, fall back. Yes, that's it. It happens in November, the day after our election. Okay, you can stop laughing now about the election. So thank you once again, and we'll see you tomorrow. Ciao, baby.